Let's do that again. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us, the authority on college sports, Pete Thamel.
Yay, Mr. Hamill!
Oh, everybody in the 313, put your hands in the air, say hi to Pete. What's going on, brother? Good to see you, brother.
Nice to see you, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. I know there's a lot of investigative journalism happening in a gambling ring that sounds like has hit college basketball again. 17 schools, 20 players. I think those numbers are accurate. What are we hearing? What are we learning? Where do we stand with college hoops right now? Should I be watching what I'm doing on my DraftKings with college hoops at this point, Pete Hamill?
Well, I just saw you flashed up David Purdum's story. He's done an excellent job tracking this. Today, Pat, is sort of the culmination of what has dripped out over the last year, that there's been an unspooling federal investigation into point shaving in Division I men's college basketball. And what really emerged today was just sort of some of the hard realities of the depths of this scandal and how far it went. 20 people were charged in this. The ringleaders were a guy named Shane Hennon and Marvis Fairley. These guys are like career gamblers, career criminals, and they basically found ways through intermediaries, which included Antonio Blakeney, a former NBA player, star at LSU, to infiltrate these mostly small college basketball programs and convince guys to throw games. And you just look at the bets that were made on these tainted games: $458,000 on Towson to beat UNC A&T, $424,000 on Kent State to cover a first half line against Buffalo. Look, I'm as jaded and cynical as they come, and those blew my mind, Pat. That first of all, someone would wager that much, and second of all, that none of that got flagged. Now, those probably weren't singular wagers; they were wagers done by this network of people who were fixing these games. But it's it's an explosive day, for modern college basketball. It's you get about one of these a decade, right? And this is significant, and I think a lot of it speaks to how accessible gambling is right now. We saw the prop bet situation in the NBA show up, and this is some of the same unsavory folks that were tied to that are also tied to this allegedly. And it's a pretty remarkable sweeping investigation that was unsealed in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania today.
Shane Hennon has been linked to all of them. All of the stories from the NBA with Chauncey Billups and
Damon
Jones, all the way to
Terry Rozier
and Porter.
Porter too.
Yeah, and Porter, I believe. Shane Hennon's been kind of linked to all of these things. And I believe there was a poker one that Chauncey was also a part of. I don't know if Shane was also a part of that one as well or not, but it feels like this Shane Hennon guy, who has a lot of aliases, is kind of a part of all of this. He seemingly figured out the racket and how to pitch or how to get people, and is kind of stretched now everywhere, which leads to the next question of this whole thing. Ty?
Yeah, Pete, how big of a concern is it that this is going to spill into the major conferences? Because like you said, it's mostly, very small mid-majors. Is the thought that NIL and the fact that, a lot of these guys in the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12 are making millions of dollars a year right now, that they're maybe not as susceptible to be caught in something like this? Or where does the NCAA stand on that as of right now?
So the biggest name school involved in this tie is DePaul in the Big East. There are a couple DePaul bets listed in the 70-page indictment today, and it looks like, again, now there were 4 current players involved in this who've played college basketball in the last week. Jeff Borzello reported that today, including a guy who got some buckets for Kennesaw State last night. But for the most part, this is past tense. It's been rooted out. There's been like a drip. There was a player who transferred a few times, ended up at Wisconsin this year, and all of a sudden he's not going to play for Wisconsin anymore because of interviews, NCAA, FBI, etc. So I do think that the damage that's listed here today is the extent of this scandal. I don't think we're going to see this flash up in some more familiar brands. And look, they preyed on the vulnerable. They preyed on the guys making $30,000 a year, not the guys making $300,000 a year. And it's pretty evident if you read through the indictment how they did this. They would show there's one portion where they sent pictures of $100,000 in cash, and they were trying to encourage a guy, hey, tell your teammates this is for them if they're gonna lose by more than 8 in the first half this weekend.
I hate it. And we're part, of what a lot of people say is the problem because we talk about sports gambling. And I can't stress this enough. People talking about sports gambling has been happening since the beginning of sports, I assume, and just in smaller circles, and it's much bigger now and certainly much more accessible. You'd assume that amount of bets on a particular low-level game on a Tuesday night would get flagged on handheld gambling. There's a chance a lot of this is still happening at brick-and-mortar casinos, which I would assume you would know more about, where they also then have a fleet of runners that go and put these bets in that either they know or don't know, and the people that are running the bets either know or don't know who the money's even coming from. That's potentially second generation, get that money in there. So the amount of interesting kind of things that can happen in this modern space of sports gambling being legalized state-wise, not federally, is certainly, kind of rearing some ripple effects into the amount of people potentially getting caught. Now, I would like to argue getting caught and getting caught up in a situation. I would like to argue, though, that the digital gambling will help root this out more because it's basically impossible not to track everything that happens on there. So it's going to be in our world now because states are receiving tax from that, a lot of money being generated for these states. Very rarely does anybody in the history of government, from my understanding, I don't know it as well as everybody else, do they turn off a pipeline of cash into a state? I don't think that's ever happened. I don't know governments well enough, but I don't think that happens. So we need to understand that sports gambling is going to continue to happen, and it's probably only going to continue to grow because there's more states still that haven't been added. So, I'm happy that we're able to catch these folks, but I am scared if this, our sports cannot just be completely ruined because of it as well. It's a weird kind of dynamic that's kind of happening in front of us all. Make sports more interesting for people. People are able to kind of feel a little bit more like they have a horse in a race. Now, obviously, there's the downsides of it all. People can get addicted. Now, granted, the digital ones cut you off. It's like there's just so many things. We're at a really a interesting breaking point of sports gambling and sports. This transition phase, probably 10 years or so. On the other side of it, what it will look like versus now. I don't know. It's wild.
Yeah.
This is you heard about the Black Sox.
Right.
Shoeless Joe.
And Pete Rose, obviously, his name, it was only a couple stories that we had really ever heard about. Now, is that because it was tough to track? Pete Rose got caught because he had a notebook, and there was other actual books that were happening, and being written. So if those were to be lit on fire, there'd be literally no evidence. So I don't know. Did it happen as much back then as it's happening now? It just feels like I'm learning of the new things happening, and I don't like any of it.
No.
And it's all seemingly easy to execute, sounds like. Just got to hope they get caught.
Right.
And then the punishments have to be
Severe.
very heavy.
All this investigation has been going on, and all these guys who were indicted, who were in the investigation, several of them played college basketball this week. So the severity of the punishment really hasn't been there.
So it started in September 2022 from the article here, and it was initially focused on a Chinese Basketball Association rigging of games. Okay, classic, how can we take advantage of something? What is not covered much? The Chinese Basketball Association. Maybe we can get in there. And then the group later targeted college basketball games, offering bribes to college players ranging from 10 to 30,000 compromised games for betting purposes, according to the indictment. Crazy.
Well, and those guys from those small schools who aren't going to the NBA, you'd assume they're probably going to the CBA or going over to Europe and playing overseas where they could probably kind of work around some of those things.
Maybe they have friends playing over there.
Yeah, people, exactly, like a network. That's when the network thing kind
And
of
they're not
stuff.
making.
All right, well, let's not continue to chat about this because college sports are awesome, too. College sports are incredible. There's a lot of very good that we have to continue to chit-chat about, but we also have to make sure that this can't happen, okay, anymore. Got to stop. And gambling on games will be available for you when you're done playing sports. But while you're doing the sports, you can't be doing it. These are two different things. You just can't be doing it. And hopefully the punishments will certainly set a tone that has to stop. Let's get to college football now. Speaking of punishments, who do those come from? The big college game coming up, but there's other stuff happening around college.
Yeah, that's a great question, Pete. The American Football Coaches Association met this prior weekend, and the college coaches unanimously voted for the Redshirt to switch from 4 games, you can play in 4 games, to 9 games. And now it has to go to a committee, I believe, to be passed. What is the difference between the 9-game Redshirt rule versus a lot of people have heard recently about the 5 for 5, basically, where once you start playing college football, you have 5 years to play. There's no red shirts or anything like that. Even if you're healthy for all 5 years, you can play all 5 years. So what's the difference between the 9-game Redshirt and maybe that? And then who is the committee that passes this and actually enforces this? Because that's the biggest question with college football right now is who is in charge of all this?
Great questions, Tone. So to me, this is a little ways to go before it becomes a reality. Obviously, the coaches are going to pass rules that favor the coaches, right? Like, and this would obviously be good for them because they could use players longer, et cetera. But it feels to me like this is an either or, right? If we don't get the 5 for 5, this is the hedge on it. As for the actual committee who's going to make this decision, I could the confluence of convoluted NCAA committees I will not bore you guys with,
Thank
but
you.
yeah, it is going to be your general NCAA committee that's filled with athletic directors, probably some presidents, et cetera. And I just feel like holistically, college sports has to make a decision on eligibility, and it has to make one soon, just because you see all these 7th year, 6th year, all this stuff. Like there just needs to be a little bit more certainty around that, and all the lawsuits. Now the NCAA will tell you that it's been harder for them to enforce some of their rules because places like Tennessee is getting an injunction for Diego Pavia. Like, there's all these things working against them on the micro level where it's been hard to set macro standards. And in this that passed in at the coaches convention this week is another example of that. So. I feel like we'll get some clarity on 5 for 5 this offseason at some point, and if not, I would think that the red shirt switch would come into play more. But it is, you do have to chuckle, like, what's the difference between 9 games and 12 games? Like that's that it is.
Yeah, and who's
Yeah,
going to
that was
enforce it? Who's going to enforce it? If somebody says, I don't want to do it, well, then there's another injunction. And then there's, well, how long does that go around? Who handles that? The courts? The local state courts? Because that's what's happening now with Winnidad, right? Down there in Ole Miss. It's his Mississippi court. Now, after watching Winnidad, we think at the next level, he might do well.
Yeah.
He might do well at the NFL. Not saying that he ever thought he wouldn't, but just like watching him live in person, it's like, I don't think this is going to be the finality of him earning income by playing football. I think he's going to make money playing football for a long time. That's why the Pavia stuff, interesting. Like, how many years was he going to be allowed to play? It's always like the guys that you don't know what's going to happen in the NFL, or you think maybe not good in the NFL. But who enforces any of it? The local state laws, courts do? That's what's happening with Winnidad, right?
Yes. So Trinidad Chambliss' lawyer, Tom Mars, and a local attorney who actually founded Old Miss's Collective are expected to file either tomorrow or early next week for an injunction, to help secure his eligibility for 2026. Chambliss is a fascinating draft case, Pat, if you look at it. I made a few calls last week on, what guys thought of him, and he's still like a 3rd, 4th round type pick. Now, look, quarterbacks value and need, those things often aren't in line, right? Like, there's probably 7 teams that really need quarterbacks right now and would draft them this year, and it's hard to find 7 viable quarterbacks who could be NFL starters coming up in this draft class. Especially with Dante Moore staying. Once you get past Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson, there's probably a pretty good gap on where you'd go. So it's an interesting crossroads for Chambliss, because he would certainly make more money in college next year than he would in the NFL next year. And if he has another season like he had, you would think he'd obviously grow as a passer. You would think maybe he's in good position for the 27 draft, but the 27 draft could be historically loaded with quarterbacks. You have Arch, you have Dante Moore, and there's a huge flurry of others. It's expected to be a once a decade type depth quarterback class as everything comes together. So it'd be interesting for Chambliss. He's an easy guy to root for, right? Like, the story's unbelievable. The performance against Georgia was probably the defining individual performance in college football this year, you could argue. He's been a remarkable player. Being around him a little bit in Phoenix last week, one of the Ole Miss staff members described him as bubbly. Like, there's an effervescence around him. He's a remarkable kid and remarkable story. Be great for college football if he's there, and ultimately that's going to be up to an NCAA appeal or the courts in Mississippi, which Tom Mars memorably said would be a more level playing field
for Ole Miss.
for the Rebels. Yes.
Yeah, it'd be a much more level playing field. The eyes are in the beholder, certainly, in that whole thing. Yeah, Trinidad is special. He looks sweet. He's thrown to a spot. He's doing all this stuff. Les Snead of the Rams, GM, actually says he likes the story of the guys coming from smaller schools and transferring up. Feels like they're hungry. Feels like they're, more humble. It's like, I think, third, fourth round, sure, but let's see what happens with the draft class. And then you talked about his game against Georgia being a transformative one of the season. I agree. Fernando Mendoza has more touchdowns than interceptions in the college football playoff right now.
Incompletions.
So, I'm sorry, incompletions. He has more touchdowns than incompletions in the entirety of the college football playoffs thus far. So that's 6-point throws versus throws to the other team. He has 2 incompletions, I think, last couple games each. It's been a methodical ass beating from Fernando Mendoza. Now, will they be able to do it against Miami? We find out. Big college game on Monday. We'll see you down there. We appreciate the hell out of you, ladies and gentlemen. That's Pete Thamel.
Thank you,